Beguiled. The anonymous letters first appeared in the newspaper on February the 1st, and caused such a stir she hid at home for a week. No one doubted they were written for her. How many Lady T's of Shropshire were there, after all? The latest letter, featured in the Valentine's edition, was the most scandalous. To the bewitching Lady T of Shropshire, thine eyes be green and thine hair red. Please accept me so we may wed. I loved you at first sight and hope you don't take fright when you lay your precious eyes on me. Tonight, at last light, together we'll be. The ball began at dusk. Her dance card filled before she'd reached the receiving line to greet her hostess. The eager faces of bachelors all claimed with their waggling eyebrows to be her secret admirer. Would he make himself known tonight? Would she run in fright? Though no one spoke to her, all eyes found her from behind fans and hands. Between the twirls and promenades of each dance, she scanned the crowd for clues. Whispers followed her, taunting her with tales of clandestine romance. And then she saw him. A shadowed figure watched her from behind a potted plant. Her pulse raced, a roar in her ears masking the voices around her. Their eyes met, and her world tilted. Hazel eyes peered at her from beneath heavy lids framed with dark eyelashes. Those eyes seemed to read her soul. Never had she believed in love at first sight, until now. He took a step towards her. She stepped towards him. A din of voices resounded around her, crescendoing when he took another step, and then a clink of glass, drawing the attention of all in the room. "But a moment, please, but a moment. I have an announcement," voiced the hostess. "It is a propitious Valentine's ball indeed, for I have the pleasure of announcing the betrothal of my eldest daughter to Lord Keys." Her eyes never left his, though he took 5 more steps forward. She counted. How many more until he reached her? He stopped, her breath caught. He wasn't walking towards her, but rather to the centre of the ballroom. A young miss, affecting well-practised ennui, took his arm. How could this be? He was the betrothed Lord Keys. No, she'd only just discovered him. She'd only just found love. Oblivious to the girl on his arm, he continued to stare at her, his eyes ablaze. Before she made a cake of herself, she tore her gaze from his and escaped by way of the terrace doors. Grasping the railing outside, she filled her lungs with air, staring at the sun setting behind a copse of trees. Footsteps sounded behind her, a gossiping matron or a vapid girl to tease her. A rumble intoned, "Elope with me." She whipped round to come face to face with Lord Keys. They stood but an arm's reach from each other. "I don't know you," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You knew me at first sight, just as I knew you." His cologne enveloped her, enticing her to move closer. "Come away with me." "But what of your betrothed?" "Inconsequential. I want you, only you. Come with me, Gretna Green awaits." He held out his hand. "Will you be my Valentine bride?" Her family's disapproving faces flashed before her eyes. "Yes." She slipped her hand into his. They fled the terrace, darting hand in hand across the park to the Circle Drive. Swift words to a curious coachman, and a bump and jostle later, they were on the road, bound for Scotland. Her stranger pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her shoulders to shield her from doubt. He kissed her deeply, soulfully, conveying to her all the words they had not yet said, affirming his heart mirrored what hers did for him. At length, she leaned away, smiling, memorizing his face, reaching a hand to trace the scar that ran from his left ear to his chin. "I've loved you since the second letter," she confessed. A crease deepened between his brows. "Letter? What letter?" She laughed at his coyness and kissed him brazenly. until it dawned he hadn't returned the laugh. The carriage continued to Scotland, his question echoing in her mind.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Lockwood. I am Director of NEHS and ELA, and it is my pleasure to welcome ELA, NEHS, Sigma Kappa Delta and Sigma Tau Delta student members and their chapter advisors to this very special webinar with Paullett Golden, author of A Dash of Romance. A little bit of housekeeping for you. We are using new webinar technology this evening, very fancy. So to increase your viewing pleasure, you can click in the bottom right of the video screen to enlarge the video to full screen mode. Before the webinar begins, I'd like to thank Naaman, Kent, Katie Mudd and Jessica McCall, who have been working behind the scenes to ensure that tonight's webinar is going to be a great success. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it very much. Tonight's interviewer is Lindsay Ward. She's from the Woodlands in Texas and is in her 16th year of teaching at College Park High School, which is a large public school in the Woodlands. She's a certified English teacher and holds a master's degree in curriculum and instruction for gifted and talented students. In addition to teaching all levels of high school English over the course of the last 16 years, she has taught a variety of elective classes, and she has been the lead advisor for the Cavalier chapter of the National English Honor Society at College Park High School for 15 years. And she has also been a much loved and highly respected member of the NHS Advisory Council since 2018. Fun fact about Lindsay, she's a fan of all things science fiction and fantasy, and I think is the only person that I know who has a classroom dragon collection. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for volunteering to lead this webinar. Naaman is going to connect us with Lindsay and Paullett in Texas right now. It may take a few seconds. There might be a bit of a delay, but I hope you enjoy the interview.
Thanks, Chris. Well, we're here with Paullett Golden, and I'd like to do a quick intro to Paullett. Paullett writes historical romances that give voice to the outliers and survivors, the wallflowers and the overshadowed. With her sensual portrayal of love and historical authenticity, she promises enchanting immersion in Georgian England, from morays to moorlands. She holds a PhD, MA, and BA with specializations including Georgian and Victorian era British Lit, Arthurian Legends, Rhetoric, and creative and professional writing. After establishing her career as a university professor and seasoned speaker, keynotes, conferences, workshops, commencements, and more, she learned from an oncologist that she only had 3 months to live. And so she did. She aimed to survive by writing her first novel, a novel she claims saved her life. While she wrote to live, she now lives to write. And her novel that we're focusing on today is called A Dash of Romance. It won the 2021 Reader's Favorite Book Award, first place in Christian historical romance. So thank you for being with us today, Paullett.
Thank you for having me.
And we have a list of fantastic questions that were submitted through the NEHS website, so I thought we'd just dive right in. Does that sound like a plan?
Good. You lead the way.
Fantastic. So our first question today is, how would you describe the life of a writer?
Ooh. Well, who was it? J.R.R. Martin, I think, who said that a reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only once. That essentially, to me, is the life of a writer. We're the ultimate time travelers. We're the alternate world tourists, the masterminds of creation. I mean, in a single afternoon, we can solve a murder, we can discover a cure, we can fight a duel, we can sprout wings, and that could be literally or figuratively, depending on the genre. I mean, we're accomplishing these impossible things that the average person in reality can accomplish. And to me, that's the best life. And that's the life of the writer. That's the life that I live. Now, my characters don't exactly sprout wings, but we're living an impossible life. And who wouldn't want to accomplish the impossible? So I think that kind of kicks us off pretty solidly there, living the impossible. What do you think?
Sounds like a fantastic life. Fantastic. Well, that will lead into our next question then. Why do you believe the historical writing and the style of Jane Austen has been able to maintain its relevance in the modern era?
Oh, you're knocking me sideways with the tough questions here. I see how this interview is going to be. Well, I think that the question would be more aptly put, what makes a book timeless? Any book, not just Jane Austen, any book. What makes it relevant, regardless of location, regardless of publication time? What makes it timeless? And that depends on your own definition. For me, I think it's the elements of human nature and what resonates us about human nature. So for Jane Austen specifically, she is relatable across cultures, across continents, because her social commentary is not on necessarily the rules and the etiquette of the time, but the reflections of human nature. And I think all good writing shares that poignancy. We can relate to the characters. I mean, it doesn't matter their prejudices, their sensibilities, their desires. We can relate to them. There's something in them, the good, the bad, the shadowy, the positively hilarious, that we can relate to. And yeah, I think that's really what makes her relatable. What makes her stand the course of time, and any author stand the course of time, is there's something in there that makes the characters immortal. So I'm going to turn the tables and ask you, as a reader, Lindsay, do you think it's the characters? Am I off on the deep end here? Do you think that it's the characters that you relate to the most that keep you going back to a book, time and time again, or is it something different? Is it the plot or whatever?
For me, it's definitely the characters. I love a good, well-built world in my reading, but it's the characters that bring me back, the characters that I fall in love with, and I want to learn more and follow them further. So I completely agree with you on that.
All right, I'm not off my rocker here.
Okay, so moving forward, what advice do you have for writing romance that is progressive, inclusive, historically accurate, and critically productive?
It's a thought-provoking question. That's for sure. Whew. So I think any writer of historical fiction or romance in particular, any writer can approach this a little bit differently. It depends on, what makes their heart sing when they write. It depends on their intended readership, greatly so, their intended readership. Do you have your tea ready? Because this might be a long answer. So for me personally, and then I might speak to how other writers might approach this, but for me personally, I head towards the historically accurate, or at least the historically authentic. I want the writing to be as authentic as possible, to portray what the world really was, despite what our misconceptions of the past might have been. So for instance, okay, I think an example is good here. I had delved fairly deeply into the racial and ethnic landscape of the late 18th century England for one of my research blog posts. And I was quite surprised by how, and I think this goes to some of those misconceptions, I was surprised by how diverse England was at the time, especially with what that diversity looked like. So, for instance, kind of a yes or no here, Lindsay.
Okay.
Would you be surprised? Did you know that there was a heavy presence of Indians in England because of the East India Company, specifically Bengalis?
I did not.
All right. That's one of the things that really, really surprised me. I had no idea. And it seems like, in hindsight, well, that seems like something obvious. It seems like something I should know. I had no idea. Even more surprising was their how people viewed them. They were highly respected. So these weren't, I mean, these weren't folks being judged. These were folks highly respected, and that may have a lot to do with, the folks that were coming over were diplomats. They were wealthy. They were influential for the trading company. But these are folks that you would want to invite for dinner. These are the folks that you would want your daughters married to the gentleman. And honestly, if you're not seeing in a historical romance of this era, if you're not seeing a heavy Indian presence, then you're not being historically accurate. But there are others. That's for me. I want to be as authentic to the time period as I can. So when I come across those gems, it opens a whole new world where I can be, accurately inclusive, progressive, and so forth. But there are other ways. So I wanted to kind of talk about some of the other ways, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something. There's a sort of a subgenre that we affectionately call romantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where modern sensibilities are represented in the historical works. So it's not authentic to the time. It's not how the characters would have thought or acted at the time, a little bit more modern, but we're still in that setting. We're still in that vibe. So for instance, the hero could be a social justice warrior.
Mm-hmm.
The heroine's maybe a bit of a girl boss. And by fitting into that subgenre, it opens the doors to all sorts of mold breaking. And I think this is sort of the thing that we see with shows like Bridgerton. And that really resonates with viewers and with readers, because they can relate a little bit more to the modern sensibilities while still enjoying that historical aspect. Another way that might fit, especially if you're not quite into the romantasy, and I have to confess, I'm not a romantasy reader, but many are. It's very popular. But if you're not so much into that and you still want to represent that accuracy, you could feature underrepresented characters and underrepresented themes. Mm-hmm. There's so much going on at the time. For instance, child labor, a huge topic. Slave trade was a huge topic. Bills were being proposed in Parliament to end the slave trade. So why not have a hero or heroine representing the characters experiencing these things, or witnessing these things, or maybe they're part of the movers and shakers. Maybe they're part of the bill being proposed. They can be part of the social movements that were really happening at the time without having the modern sensibilities of the romantasy era. So you can break the mold and go full on, let's have modern sensibilities, or you can have a more accurate approach of what's really going on, which just so happens to echo some of the things that are important to us. But I think the take home here really is you want, which goes back to what we were just saying, actually, you want the characters to connect with the readers. You want the readers to connect to that. We've got to have that connection. And that's what makes them timeless. So in whatever way that you want to do this, in whatever way you think that the readers would respond better to your characters, that's the way I think to do it. There's not really a right answer. It's just, how you like to do it.
And it seems like in your deep dives and what you discover in your research, there's so much inspiration that hides in those deep dives.
Yes, like it is amazing that like the social movements that you come across, and you're like, why is this not a plot point? This needs to be a plot point. My character needs to be involved in this. The miners in Wales, like, oh, there's so much to dive into. Like we need more characters representative of the miners in Wales. We need a hero. We need a hero who's a miner, or maybe a mining owner. Anyway, I digress.
Well, that's fantastic. Okay, next question. So our next question, okay, as an ovarian cancer survivor, you have a unique perspective on life and resilience. How has your personal journey influenced your writing, and what message do you hope to convey to your readers through your stories?
Where to begin? Oh,
good question.
Yeah, that was okay. It's involved. Well, really, there's so much that I infuse in my characters, whether I realize it or not. I can't help but I can't. This is part of me now. My whole survival story is part of me now, and I can't help for those aspects to become part of the characters' journeys, part of the themes, like even something as small as embracing your own uniqueness, embracing your flaws and idiosyncrasies, that ends up becoming a theme. And it directly connects with my experiences, even though I may not necessarily say I'm going to, input this experience. It just happens. But I think one of the most poignant concepts really is that idea that we have to overcome our own obstacles. We have to resolve our own conflicts. And this is going to sound terrible. I don't mean it to sound terrible, but that realization that no one's coming to save you. Mm. We can only save ourselves. Mm-hmm. We have to face down our demons. And if we can face down our own demons, if we can resolve our own conflicts, then the world is our oyster. Mm-hmm. So especially with historical romance, we have this idea that like love conquers all. Let's kind of deal with love at the moment, since that's the main theme. Love conquers all. For me, I see love more as the motivator than the actual conqueror. Love is what's motivating us to conquer whatever it is that's holding us back. So we've got a goal and we've got obstacles that are in our way to achieving this goal. And it's love that makes us, break down those obstacles. It's our motivating factor. And we see this a little bit more in some of my stories, a little less than others. But in all of my stories, in some fashion or another, the characters are resolving their own conflicts. The hero may come to the heroine's rescue in some small situation, or vice versa. But ultimately, it's still, the characters resolving their own inner conflict. I think a good example is in my debut novel, actually, not in Dash, but in my debut novel, The Early Enchantress. We see this really strongly, where it doesn't seem to matter how much the heroine loves the hero, how much she tries to build up his confidence and support him and everything. He can't fully return her love because he doesn't love himself. And all her platitudes aren't going to fix his hangups. Mm-hmm. So in the end, he has to face his past, he has to face his demons, and he has to take some ownership there and learn to accept the past, learn to accept himself all by himself. But without her love, he wouldn't have been motivated to look in the mirror, so to speak. So I think that's a pretty good takeaway. So, you can infuse, whether you're intentionally or not, you can infuse aspects of your journey into the characters in the story. And I know I do it, but that's really the driving factor, that no one's going to come and save you. You got to save yourself. And I hope that I do it in such a way that it might even inspire readers to, face their own demons, rather than waiting for, the great hero to do it for them.
Ooh, that's some good advice.
It's much deeper than I had intended.
Okay. Well, yeah, again, we have some fantastic questions here. The next one. Okay. I'm very interested in this one too. What would you suggest to begin the creative process of writing for young writers? Because I'm also a high school English teacher. I have students constantly saying, what do I do? How can I get started? And I'd love to hear what your advice is for them.
Well, my question back to you, you don't actually have to answer it. My question to the young writers, is, what do you enjoy reading? Because that's really where you start. Typically what you enjoy reading the most, that's what drives what you write. Now, it's not always the case. You might have like some story bursting to come out of you, like an autobiography, even though you're not prone to reading autobiographies. Or maybe you love all the genres. I love all the genres, and you can't write in all. Well, I guess you can write in all the genres, but but it's really what resonates with you the most, where you keep going back to the bookshelf for more of that genre, whether it's that same author or not. You're going back to the same genre. You're going back to the same genre, and that could be the sign of this is what you want to write. You want to enter that world. You want to craft that world, build that world. So before you even start writing, as a budding, aspiring writer, before you even start writing, you need to be an avid reader. You've got to read, you got to read just as much as you can in that genre. Other genres too, but especially in that genre. Really immerse yourself in that genre. Specifically get to know the writers of it. The independent writers, the traditional writers, the award winners, maybe those guys on the fringes. Sink yourself into the genre. And it's more than just reading the genre because you enjoy it. There comes a time where you're studying the genre, if you will. You're studying the plots. You're studying what connects you with the characters. You're studying what stands out, what jars you even. What are some of the differences in styles? Who is everybody reading? Who's the most popular? And you begin to study that. And that starts that transition into writing. And from there, just write. It doesn't matter if you have a plot in mind, a character in mind, anything, just write and see how it feels.
Mhm.
Write a single isolated scene, or I guess in some cases, a single stanza of a poem. And just write and see where it takes you. Maybe it becomes a full story, maybe it won't. But the point is to get the fingers moving, get the mind working. And the more you write, the more you think like a writer. And then eventually the more you become a writer. And you're only a writer if you're writing, right? It kind of, goes without saying. But that sort of becomes your intrinsic motivation to continue to write and to move towards publication. Is as you're writing, are you enjoying it? And if you're enjoying it, if you're enjoying the writing, then it's a sign that you should keep writing. If you're not enjoying the writing, maybe you shouldn't be a writer. And I've seen plenty of folks struggle with that. And it seems like a weird thing to say, if you're not enjoying writing, don't write. And then why are you, but people do. Like maybe it's somebody's told them that they should. Maybe they're seeing somebody have success and they want to try it too. Maybe in their mind, they think that they can become, a millionaire bestseller if they could just write, but they're hating every moment. They're trudging through it. Maybe this isn't quite for you. But you just really have to get in there and see if you like it. And if you like it, then this may be your calling. I actually wanted to recommend, and this might be, especially if you go back to me saying, well, just write anything, get the fingers moving, and you're still staring at that blank page going, what do I write about? A chip on a teacup? I'm stuck. So experimenting is a really good place. And so I think I'm going to recommend a book. There's lots of books out there, that are inspirational or prompt driven, but this one really changed my life in a way. This is kind of how I got started when I had what do you call it, like blank page syndrome, where I wanted to write. I loved writing, but getting started, and so I would read some more and I'd feel inspired, and then I'd go blank page syndrome. The 3 a.m. epiphany is what it's called.
Okay. The 3 a.m. epiphany.
Now I don't know, how many versions or how many editions, or if there's just one. The version I have is, if I remember correctly, it is a blue cover. It's pretty plain, blue cover. Absolutely life-changing for me. It got me writing and got me over the blank page syndrome. And there was just nothing more inspiring than here's a prompt, and that is going to make you change styles, genres, angles, perspectives, just get you experimenting. And I would fill pages. And that's one of those clues that I enjoy the writing process, and I want to keep doing it. And I might turn one of these into a book. Okay, so based on your expertise, as a teacher, do you have any books or resources, or even maybe a tip that you might recommend to aspiring writers to get them going?
Well, we are of the same mind, I think, because the first thing I tell my students is read, because our minds we're computers. Input is output. And the more you read, the more, as you mentioned, the more you learn about the genre, the more you learn about the way to craft a sentence and how to let your natural voice shine through. So 100% agree with you on that. But I do have a question about the connected to Dash, because at the back of Dash, A Dash of Romance, you have your selection of flash fiction. And I do wonder, are those your 3 a.m. epiphanies? I love that idea that you're just drafting all these wonderful stories and that you're sharing them.
Yeah, they're really just short little nothings. But that's kind of where it starts. What do you do with the collection of the short nothings? What do you do with the experiments? And it's like, well, you could turn them into a collection on their own, a collection of shorts. Or even take one and expand it into something bigger.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, with all of these 3 a.m. epiphanies and all of this research, and of course, you're also a teacher, how do you find this? That brings us to our next question. How do you find the time to write? Is it all writing at 3 a.m.?
Sometimes. Well, let's see. The best purchase that you could ever make as a writer is a time turner.
Okay.
But, we can't all afford time turners. But it is a great purchase. It is a great purchase. You'll never regret it. let me set the scene. Aside from time turners, let me set the scene. When I wrote my debut novel, I was commuting nearly 2 hours to work. My commute started about 5 a.m. I taught class at 7 a.m. Following that was a full day of teaching, is a full day of meetings, yada, 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 yada. And then a 2-hour commute home. And I got home maybe around 6 or so, and I collapsed on the couch, exhausted. Somewhere in all of that, commuting and teaching and exhaustion, I wedged in grocery shopping, eating, grading, laundry, house cleaning, time with friends, time with family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you think, okay, within all this, it's impossible to find the time to write. There's literally no time in the day to wedge this. So what I pose to fellow writers is to think of writing differently. Writing doesn't mean fingers on the keyboard. Writing is happening 24/7. Writing, I said most of my writing was happening on my drive to work. I mean, that was 4 hours a day that I was spending in the car. And most of my writing happened. Obviously, I'm not fingers on a keyboard because I'm driving, right? But that's when I'm plotting my scene. I might go as far as to do like a voice to text capture on maybe some of the dialogue or the descriptions that I didn't want to forget. But most of the time, I'm just plotting in my head, and I'm seeing where characters are going to go. I'm getting to know characters. I'm seeing how characters would react, and this is all writing. It's not the physical, but it is writing. Mm-hmm. And that ended up turning into taking advantage of all those little moments. I never wanted to lose a moment. So if I'm sitting in a waiting room, I'm waiting for the chiropractor, I pull out my notes and I start jotting down little notes. I start jotting down little thoughts or little phrases, maybe a sentence that I wanted a hero to say to the heroine. I'm standing in the line at the grocery store, another great opportunity. Instead of getting frustrated by, gosh, this guy has 30 items and I have 2. Oh no, perfect moment. Thank heavens. Take your time. I'm going to pull out my notepad and I'm going to start taking notes. So it came to the point where I was never not writing. Then by the time I wedged in that moment to actually open up the laptop and physically tap down, I would open my notes and find that I had already collected entire chapters. They were all mapped out. The dialogue was already brainstormed. It was just really the time to actually physically write. But that writing time was productive. There wasn't a blank page to intimidate me. I already had everything. So it was like, okay, organizing and tapping it all out. And it was so easy. It was so smooth. And you might find, with that said, that the people with the busiest schedules can sometimes have the most productive writing, and the people with wide open schedules, like let's say the person who took off a year to write, they find that they haven't written a diddly squat by the end of that year. So it's just a matter of thinking of writing differently, approaching it differently, and plotting it whatever you can. So okay, let's for the aspiring writers out there, let's think of this in a term in break it down to tips. Mm-hmm. Always write. Mm-hmm. No matter, scheduling, busyness, it doesn't matter. Always write. This means that even if it's in your head, you're plotting, you're mulling, you're never not writing. And that doesn't mean physically writing. Prioritize your writing. It is just as important as doing your laundry. Mm-hmm. Someone may disagree, but prioritize that. Prioritize it just as if you would prioritize doing your laundry. Put it on the calendar. Maybe you put it on the calendar the same day, the same time every week, just as though it were a work meeting. You have to make the time and you have to commit to it. Even if nothing's happening and you're like, I'm not inspired, I'm not feeling anything. You are there. You have arrived at your writing meeting and you're going to sit there for an hour and be committed to staring at the page, Yeah. Be dedicated. You can't push something off. You can't negotiate with yourself that you're going to do it later. Oh, I'll do it after this show. No, turn off the show. Commit to it. It is priority, and it's the same kind of priority as a work meeting. Would you skip your work meeting? No, then don't skip your writing meeting. Mm-hmm. You can't build muscle if you're not consistent at the gym. You can't learn to play the piano proficiently if you're not practicing consistently. So you have to be dedicated to those writing sessions, even if you're staring at the page for an hour. Never, ever, ever wait for inspiration. And this is our third tip. This is our third tip or fourth tip. I've lost track. Fourth tip. Yeah, so we have always write, be committed, prioritize with be committed, be dedicated, and then never ever wait for inspiration. Stephen King said this really well in his book on writing. Now, I'm not going to necessarily recommend that our viewers run and buy On Writing, because it is a niche kind of thing. It's niche, but some great tips are in there. And one of the tips, it's not really a tip, it's just one of his comments is that amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work. And like, it's so true. If you sit and wait for inspiration, you're going to be staring at the blank page forever. You just got to get up and go to work. So don't wait for inspiration. And that's really, I guess, where the 3 a.m. epiphany comes in. Pull up a prompt if you have to, write some fan fiction, do something. And that will eventually, evolve into a story, or that inspiration that you weren't going to wait for. And it'll strike you when you least suspect it. So yeah, forget the busy schedule. You're going to find the time.
Well, and I love this idea of the writer's mindset that you shared, like when you're in your car driving, when you're standing in the store line at the grocery store, etc. And I do wonder, and this leads into our next question too, in a way. The next question, I'll make the connection. The next question is how you develop your characters to make them authentic to the period you're writing about. But I think about making characters authentic. And if you're in that writer's mindset, you're observing the world, you're observing people. Do you find yourself blending those modern habits in with the historical characters to add to their authenticity?
Oh my gosh, yes. And then some. All of my characters are really based on real people. And it is not necessarily like, Lindsay, I'm going to write a character that's based on you. It's standing behind the guy at the grocery store with his 30 items, all of a sudden he becomes a character. And he'll take on, like, I don't know the guy. I don't know anything about him. But there was something about him, some little habit, some phrase he said, some movement he made that said you're going to be a character, and then that becomes a person of their own mind. Obviously that's modern, a modern person becoming a historical character. But the historical aspect is pretty easy to tie in. Because the more research you do, the more reading you do of the time, the more you get the voice and the vibe of that era. And especially when you start thinking about like their upbringing, like, are they an aristocrat? Are they a commoner? Their location, are they from Cornwall? Are they from Sussex? And all this is going to be sort of, common phrases that might be regional, perspectives and reactions that might relate to their personalities. An aristocrat's going to have a different pet peeve than the head gardener. So that kind of voice and vibe of the era can be pretty easily tied in, but it starts with the real person. And I build my characters as real people, all the way to what is their favorite dessert. Now, interviewing your characters is a pretty good technique, and I've done that a few times. Usually not in the brainstorming. It's usually when I get stuck on something, or there's that sort of writer's block moment, and it's like, all right, hold on, let's sit down. I'm going to interview my characters, see what's going on, ask them some questions, some deeper questions. How you feel about this moment, but when I'm building the characters, I want to know absolutely everything about them, so that they are not just authentic to the time, but they're authentic to themselves. They're authentic to the people that I'm basing them off of, and that the kind of people that we would connect to. And that really has a lot to do with their internal conflicts, their fears, the obstacles that would get in the way of the conflicts. Because, just because an obstacle comes, it doesn't mean it's going to be an obstacle to your internal conflict. The obstacles are really personal. What would keep you from accomplishing your goal? That's really personal. And that's something that makes us unique. And that's something that builds who we are, is what ends up stopping us. And I think those aspects alone can make these living, breathing people, rather than a name on a page or a cardboard stand-in. Now, this isn't necessarily going into the internal, because I think that's really the heart of it, is the internal conflicts and those obstacles. What would motivate them and what would stop them. But In terms of character development, this might help writers, especially if they've never done character development before, or if they're getting that feedback of you have cardboard or stagnant character, you have flat characters. That's a word that you'll often hear, a flat character, and you're like, what do I do? So three character development methods that I would recommend that I really rely on for that initial build is the Myers-Briggs personality. It's really my starting point. And you can even have your character take the Myers-Briggs quiz. And the site that I would recommend the most is 16 Personalities. There's a lot of other, little sites and tests out there, but the one that it is the best out there. 16personalities.com. And it's literally like 16. It's not like 16. It's 16personalities.com. And you can have your characters take the personality test, and or you can read about the individual personalities and kind of see where you're vibing. And you could even, read the personalities, get a kind of sense of where you think that they are, and then take the test and just see how it compares, see how things change. But anyway, that's a big build for me. That's pretty important. I also look at their love language, the 5 love languages by what's his name, Chapman. I can't remember his name, Chapman, something. Whatever, 5 love languages. And that's really, it doesn't always have to do with love. I mean, how people feel fulfilled. I can speak, I swear. This is why I'm a writer and not an orator. So how people feel fulfilled by even coworkers or parents, or how to communicate with your children. That's a love language. So it's not necessarily like romance, the romance love language, the romance language. So anybody can look at love languages, but how they feel fulfilled. That's a really good one. And also zodiac sign. The zodiac sign can get a little bit like, you don't want to look at the stereotypes for the zodiac signs. You want to dig a little bit deeper. To what might drive the character. And that's usually the zodiac signs is where I get those internal desires and fears and conflicts. The zodiac signs can really can clue you in on some of those. So those are 3 ways that I would recommend writers start in developing characters if they're looking for some tips and tricks. And I actually share those, share that aspect of character development in my periodic newsletters, just in case, readers want to get to know my characters a little bit more. They can actually see that behind the scenes build. But, if you don't like those 3 techniques, there are so many character building forums online. I mean, take your pick, Wiki how building a character. Yeah.
And I when I look at your website, I love that you have your inspo photos and these wonderful little rabbit holes for your readers to see where you find your ideas and do your research and find your authenticity. So I think it's spectacular. So in that realm, and we've talked characters, let's I guess this question really looks more at, I guess, big picture story purpose. What does your querying and questioning process look like prior to writing? So when you're starting to dive in, what do you ask yourself?
It actually, they really do go really well together. My stories are all character driven. Okay. They're not plot driven. They are character driven. My characters do everything. And that's where I start. I don't have a plot. I have characters. So like the guy at the grocery store, I say, I'm going to build a story around you, which means that I'm going to have to get to know this person. I'm going to have to get to know the fears and the desires, the obstacles, knowing what that person to character's goal is will often tell me what the plot's going to be. The obstacles he runs into are directly related to, whatever is keeping him from the goal. So it's like every time we have an inciting incident, it's him running into that obstacle, running into that fear, running into that thing that's keeping him from his goal. And it's the characters. It's the characters that provide that roadmap. And they're the heart of the book. And I'll confess that I usually have no idea how the story is going to end. I'll plot up to a point. Based on they're trying to reach their goal and things are keeping them from the goal, and they're overcoming a little bit at a time. And so I'll plot a certain way, and then I get to a point where I just stop plotting and I leave in a mystery because I want the character to derive the direction. I know how the character is going to react from moment to moment. I know how they're going to get over those obstacles, because those little hurdles, because, you know, I've built them and I've gotten to know them well, but I don't always know what will be that motivating factor at the end, what will ultimately be them facing down their demons and saying, this is it, I'm gonna get it done. I don't know. So I leave it open, and it's usually not until the very end that the character decides its direction and the ending is revealed. And this kind of goes to, I don't know if you've heard the phrase or the words plotter versus pantser. It's sort of a popular way writers have to describe their plotting processes. They're either a plotter or they're a pantser, and pantser being, you know, they fly by the seat of their pants, which sounds very naughty if you're British, but so sorry, flying by the seat of their pants. And I'm somewhere in the middle where I can't write the story without a plot, but I only plot to a certain point, and then after that, I'm just along for the ride. So I'm like half plotter, half pantser.
Okay.
And it's okay to be, you know, not be decisively one or the other. You can be somewhere in the middle. But the querying process, the questioning process, it all starts with that character, and they drive the rest.
Okay. And as you're plotting and pantsing, I think this is leading well into the next question. Revision. Are you a revise as you write person, or do you like to get it all on the page and go back later for revisions? What fits better?
All of the above, all the things. Oh gosh. Okay. But I want to keep in mind, whatever I do, you know, is only so useful to, you know, aspiring writers. So I'll kind of, you know, I guess explore what I do, all the things, but also give some, you know, little tips and tricks here. So I think actually I'll start with the tip and trick is, you don't want to get so caught up in perfecting and revising and changing that you never make progress. And I see a lot of writers fall into this, especially in my writing, my writing group. There'll be writers that they're still on chapter 1, and they've been on chapter 1 for, you know, 3 years, and they just keep revising it, and they keep changing it, and they keep rethinking the plot, and they're still on chapter 1. They're still on chapter 1. And you also don't want to spend time constantly rereading and preening. And that was actually something that one of my writing group members called it. And she said, you know, I'll go back and I'll read one of my scenes, and I'm just preening because I'm so pleased with how well it's written, and the word choices and the turn of phrases, and how can I possibly go forward, because it's never going to be as good as this. So you don't want that. But you also don't want to be too, you know, self-critical, and you're trying to alter the scope and change the plot and change. It's really about finding that sweet spot where you're able to move forward. So how I typically do it to not fall into one of those traps and find that sweet spot is, I'll finish a chapter, and I'm getting ready to write the next chapter, and this is the important moment. I'm getting ready to write the next chapter. This is the focal point. I've already finished the previous chapter. Like, this isn't, okay, I've written a chapter, now I got to perfect it. No, I'm moving forward. So what I'll do is I'll go back and I'll reread the chapter that I've just finished, and I will make minor revisions and edits. You can't help it. I'm changing words, I'm changing sentences, I'm reorganizing, but I'm not doing it because I'm rereading the first chapter. I'm doing it because I'm trying to propel myself forward and gain that momentum to the next chapter. I'm building that flow. I'm getting so into that first chapter that I can just, you know, momentum myself into the next one, and I just flow with it. So it's not like I'm gonna revise, I'm gonna edit, take a little break. No, it's like I'm revising, I'm editing, and then the fingers are still going, and I'm typing chapter 2. Deep revisions are going to come later. So to me, they're not important. They're not important as I'm rereading that first chapter. It doesn't matter if there's plot holes. It doesn't matter if there's inconsistencies. I will change those little things that bug me, but I want the momentum. I've got to have that momentum, and that focus is ever present. I'm going towards the next chapter. I'm writing the next chapter. The only reason I'm rereading is to write the next chapter. And it's once I finish the book that I can then go back, do the real revisions, get, deep and dirty, find those plot holes, find the lulls, the where the story kind of bogs down, delete unnecessary description. I can do all that later. There's even sometimes I'll have like scene placeholders. Where I was stumbling, didn't know how to approach it, so I just sort of skipped over it. I'll go in and fill in those blanks, but I'll do that later. I do that after it's finished, and usually after it's finished, that's when I know what needs to go in that one scene. But I don't get stuck on it. Okay. Editing, is what happens at the end. That's where all the plot holes have been filled. Why edit if you're just going to delete something anyway? Why edit if you're just going to revise it all anyway? So at the very end, you got the edits, the word sentence level, sharpening the language, addressing those pesky adverbs, whatever you want. And I think, to some degree, revising and editing can kind of oscillate. And you do want to involve secondary readers, and that can be friends, strangers, professional editors, whatever, and they'll give you that insight. Letting a draft sit will often work really well too. You can look at it with fresh eyes, and that's where you find out what works for you. But for me, it's happening all at the same time, but I'm never losing sight of that goal. And I think that's what's important for folks to remember is you can't get stuck. You can't preen. You can't be too critical. You can't be so obsessed with perfecting the first chapter that you never move on, and you're writing one scene for 3 years.
Well, you're giving fantastic advice for our budding writers out there. I'd like to ask, as we're getting close to the end of our time, but I'd like to ask you about publishing. And what was the moment where you decided to go into indie publishing over traditional when you started publishing your work?
Ooh. Why did I go indie? Okay. Oh, all right. Every writer, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this. I'm gonna preface this with every writer who is considering publication needs to consider which direction they want to go. The process is completely different if you go indie or if you go traditional, all the way from the proposal process to the finished product. It's a completely different adventure, and you need to know which way you want to go. So for instance, if you enjoy doing your own marketing, if you like complete freedom, you want to make your own edits, you want to decide how your cover looks, you want to choose your fonts for your format, you want to choose a timeline for your drafting, indie might be for you. But if you'd rather take the sage advice from publishers and allow them to do the marketing, allow them to do the cover design, they're the experts, right? Allow them to do the editing, leaving you more time to write, although to stricter deadlines, then traditional might be the better way to go. There is and maybe it's not here anymore, but I think there still is a misconception that every writer's goal is traditional publishing, and those who can't go indie. And that's not the case. I think to some degree it was the case at one time. I say carefully, but it's definitely not the case anymore. These are intentional choices. Informed, well-researched choices. And you have to decide what works for you. There's not going to be a right answer. And, you may even get into say, I'm going to go traditional. Then you decide, oh, never mind, maybe I should go indie, or vice versa. I'm going to go indie. And you decide, you can always change your mind. But you do intentionally need to choose what's going to be right for you. So there are 3 routes. Kind of break this down for a minute, I think. And this will help really iron out why I chose indie. 3 routes: large publication house, independent small press, independent self-publishing. So it's not just traditional and self-publishing. There is the independent small press that the folks can think of. That might be a good starting point, especially if you're not quite sure. You want a little bit of both worlds. You can go independent small press, but 3: large, small press, and indie. Self-publishing. The large house, the large publication, I can speak, large publication house will require you to find an agent. And that's a very important step. They used to have open submissions. They don't anymore. The publication process is, the proposal process is different. You will have to find an agent. Large houses will usually have contests. They may not be annual, but they do occasionally have contests where there's a call for open submissions that doesn't require you to have an agent. So you can be on the lookout for that. But other than those contests and calls for submissions, you're going to have an agent. The large publication houses are going to require you, there's going to be less control, we'll say that, in every aspect of the publication process. Less control gives you more time to write is the positive, but less control also means that you're not saying what's on the cover. They're saying what's on the cover. But I mean, they're doing all of the behind the scenes work. So they're doing the marketing. They're taking the pressure off. They're doing all of that so that you have more time to write. But if you're a control freak, then, you might be like, but I want to do that. But I don't want to delete the scene. But I want to do the marketing, So the small presses are kind of that middle ground where you will be doing a lot of the marketing. You will have more pushback if you don't like an edit, then you can work it out with them. There's a lot less restrictions, but they're also helping with some of that behind the scenes. So they will do the cover art, but they'll consult you.
Okay.
So there's that nice little, you have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more say, but they're still doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The small presses, you do not need an agent. The small presses are typically open to unsolicited. They very often have annual contests that you can submit to. So there's more opportunity to go that way. And a lot of the larger houses have, say, affiliates that are small presses. And that does provide that door to the larger presses if you wanted to go that way eventually. But the indie is where you, as the writer, you are doing everything. And this is perfect for the type A personalities. This is perfect for the control freaks. This is perfect for someone like me. You have total freedom. You get to do and choose everything. And that does mean all the pressures that come with it. So you have to do the covers. You have to do the edits. You have to do the formatting. You have to do the marketing. You have to do everything. So it's like the pro and the cons are all rolled into one, where nobody's doing it for you. You're doing it all. But, there are, like you say with indie, you can, get a team. You can hire a cover artist. You can hire a professional formatter. You can hire a professional editor. It's all coming out of your pocket. So like a publishing house would be paying for that with their own in-house staff. You're paying for it if you hire someone else. You can even, for marketing, you can even hire a PR agent. You can even hire an author assistant if you wanted to take the pressure off yourself, but it all costs money. So it kind of comes down to, do I want to do it myself for free? Do I want to pay someone else to do it? Or do I want a house to do it? So when I set out to do, to publish my debut, I didn't even know what indie publishing was. I was still of that old mindset that you have to go, publishing house. And it was through my research that I discovered the other possibilities. And the more I learned about indie, the more intimidating it got. Like, I'm going to have to do marketing. I don't even have a social media account. How am I going to do social media marketing when I don't even have, So it took a lot of research and a lot of like come to Jesus moments. But in the end, I realized that was going to be perfect for me because I could control everything. and if you're a perfectionist like me, it's, it's kind of the way to go. But you have to do your research and you have to decide what's going to work for you.
Well, and I've got to say, after going through your website, you've definitely mastered the online marketing for your books and the resources that you publish for your works. I really enjoyed doing the deep dives on the book study units that you've included and the inspiration as well. But I'm afraid that's the end of our time. So, but I would like to ask, leave our viewers with one more thing. What would you say to help someone, those aspiring writers, get over their nerves to get out there and just put their work out there and take that leap, what would you say to encourage them?
Ooh, part of me wants to say, just do it, never mind your nerves, just do it. But there's a little bit more, prep work there. There's a little bit more prep work. You've got to reach a point where you realize that there are readers out there that need your story, that are going to connect with it and resonate with it just as much as you do. And to me, that's what publishing is all about. Never publish because you want attaboys. Mm-hmm. Never publish because you think you're going to be the next big thing. You publish because you say to yourself, this story has so much meaning for me that I bet there's another reader out there who's going to find meaning as well. Even if it's just one out of a billion, there's going to be one reader out there that connects to this and takes as much from it as I do. And that's what really drives you to overcome your nerves. I got to do it. I got to do it for that one reader. There's somebody out there who needs the story. And I think that also helps get over the fear factor if you're afraid of criticism. And that'll keep people from publishing quite often is I'm going to get negative feedback, and I don't want negative feedback. I'm going to get that person who tells me I can't write, and I'm going to take it to heart. And you've got to develop a thick skin, but intentionally so, where like you join a writer's group and you hear the negative feedback from the writer's group before you hear it from the world. And it doesn't take long before you start sort of categorizing negative feedback. Like there's a lot of negative comments out there that have nothing to do with you. And maybe it's another writer who's jealous of your talent, or jealous of the guts it took that you published and they didn't. Some of them are like, well, I don't like this genre. Like, I don't like your writing style. Well, it's nothing to do with your writing style. They just don't like it. Not everybody likes Stephen King's writing style. Do you think his feelings are hurt? But there are plenty of people who do. And you're writing for the people who do. And that's what you have to take to heart is, forget the people who don't like it. It's the people who are going to love it as much as you that you're publishing, that you're taking that leap for. But I love the negative comments that offer me that constructive criticism, because you need it. You need it if you're going to grow as a writer. You need to know what you could do better. I think one of the best comments early on that I got in a review, they took off some stars for it, and they were like, the pacing is so slow. The pacing's terrible. And I'm like, I don't like my pacing. But aha moment, I've got to work on my pacing. Like this is something tangible that I could do, that I can grow as a writer. Let me study pacing. Let me study pacing techniques. So then for my next book, I can grow as a pacing writer. So you got to learn to turn the negative into constructive moments. And so when you're developing that thick skin in preparation for negativity, it's really so that you can funnel the different types of negativity and realize what's about you, what's not about you. And nobody has the right to judge your writing. So it's really, is this going to help me or not? I'm going to keep what's going to help me and I'm going to ditch the rest. So I want to say, just do it. But there's a little bit more involved. Get to that point where you know that there's a reader out there who's going to want it as much as you, just that one person. And you publish for that. You submit for that.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Paullett, thank you so much for being with us today. And I truly hope that all of our viewers go out and get A Dash of Romance, because it's a great read. I fell in love with Percy and Abigail, and I really enjoyed the I thought of them as little dessert nuggets at the back with the flash fiction. So those were just as much fun to read. And I appreciate you being here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we can chat some more and delve more into writing at another opportunity. Good luck with all the writers out there too.
Yes.
Well, that was really good, right? Thank you all so much for your attendance this evening, for sending your questions to us for the internet. If you would like to purchase a text by Paullett, please feel free to do so via the English Honor Society's bookshop page. We'll send you that link. All of your purchases through bookshops support independent writers and independent bookstores, and there's nothing better than that. Earlier, this afternoon, Paullett selected what she considers to be the most thought-provoking questions that were submitted for this interview. Those 3 questions were submitted by Lydia Kowalski in Maryland, Paulette Kane in New Hampshire, and Althea Garden in Pennsylvania. Each of them will be receiving an exclusive signed copy of A Dash of Romance in the mail shortly. We will also, though, not all is lost, we will also be sending out 3 further texts to people who are chosen randomly who leave very, very high quality feedback on Beguiled, a short story by Paullett Golden. We'll try and put that link into the chat here. If not, we will give it to you via email tomorrow. And we will reach out to you afterwards if you've been selected. So good luck with that. If you want to watch the interview again, it will be made available on our YouTube channel at Sigma Tau Delta English. If you click on the bell icon to subscribe, you'll receive updates and interesting video content from us. Finally, look out for more information about our next webinar, which will be with author Bradley Sides in May. That's after convention. We'll be in touch about that close to the time. Good night.